Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'll be your host for today's webinar. I am Rashdeep and I'm the co-founder and CEO at ReWiser. First of all, I would like to thank uh, all of you for joining in for today's webinar. I hope the webinar will be useful for you. In the next 1 hour, for the first 45 minutes, I'm going to talk about the SATs, ACTs, AP exam, the study abroad admission process. And then towards the end, we will open the forum for Q&As. Feel free to put in any question that you have pertaining to anything related to study abroad. In the chat section, we would take up all your questions towards the end. And before I start, I would also like to thank the school, the counselors, both the ma'am, who have given us this opportunity to present in front of all of you guys. With that, let me quickly start. And I won't take too long, but just give you a quick brief in terms of what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about the 4 major pillars of strong college application. And before I even get into that, I think the idea here is, so I'm assuming you are either here because you are exploring study abroad as an option for your undergrad studies. That could be one. Second, you are also exploring colleges in India which are looking for SAT scores. For example, Ashoka, Azim Premji, Shiv Nadar, Kriya, and so on and so forth. So we will also talk about that. What are the universities or colleges in India which are accepting SAT scores as well? What's the right time for you to start preparing for these exams? What's the right time for you to write these exams? How are these tests different from each other? And what are the new digital SAT format that you will encounter, right? So I think all of this is what we will talk about in today's webinar for the next 40-45 minutes. Just a quick brief introduction about the company. So we are a high school support company, which assists students worldwide achieve their high school academic goals. We've been helping students across the globe for the last 7 years. We have helped about 4,000 odd students in the last 7 years, currently help students from more than 8+ countries. We largely help students starting from grade 8 to grade 12. And our major area of expertise is the test prep, where we help students preparing for PSAT, SATs, ACTs, and AP exam. And these are all the exams that we're going to talk about today. And I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of good information that you'll be able to gather from here. If you would like to take a note, you could do that. We will also be sharing the recording for all the folks who have registered with us for this webinar. We will also be sharing the recording of this webinar with you folks. Right? With that, let me jump onto the webinar straight away. So I think the first thing that we're going to talk about is what are the 4 pillars of college application. And I think before I even talk about that, I think I want to put a few things in perspective, right? How is admission in India versus admission outside of India different from each other, right? So if you really look at admissions in India, I think what is more important for admission in India, it could be based on your grade 12 percentage, the score that you finally get, or it'll be based on the exam scores that you get, the rank that you get, right? For example, you'll write IIT JEE for engineering, you'll write NEET for medicine, you'll write CLAT for law, and so on and so forth, right? So there are different exams that you'll write, you'll perform well in those exams, you'll get certain rank, and based on that rank, you will get into the college, right? So that's how Indian admission works, or places like Delhi University or a couple of other places where you will get admission based on your 12th scores, right? So I think what is more important, your 12th grade scores and the final ultimate result that you get from any exam that you write. Unlike Indian admission, when you're looking for study abroad, things look very, very different, right? So they are not just looking at your grade 12 score, but they are looking way beyond that, right? And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. They will largely look at 4 different pillars, right? So one of them is academics. And when I say academics, they will look at academics from grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and your grade 12 predicted scores. So when you're applying to colleges outside of India, you have to submit your scores in grade 9, 10th, and 11th, and your 12th predicted scores. I think that's one of the major difference between study in India versus outside of India. So the first major pillar for study abroad is academics, which is super, super, super important. The second important pillar in your study abroad is standardized testing, which includes your SATs, ACTs, IELTS, TOEFL, APs. All these exams comes under the standardized testing, right? That's the second component. The third important component or the pillar in your college application process is profile building. Now, when I generally do this as a seminar live in front of the audience, I generally ask them the question, what do you think is profile building for you, right? And I think I get different answers saying profile building is about doing internship. Somebody will say about it research. Somebody would say doing some projects, so some social service, maybe participating in sports. right? So all of this put together is profile building, which is right. But I think what is the end goal for it, right? The end goal for profile building is nothing but you're trying to see what you really want to do in college, right? So for example, if there's a student who wants to pursue mechanical engineering in college, now to showcase to the college that you are a candidate who is interested in doing mechanical engineering, what are the steps that you really need to take, right? What are the things that you really need to do that stands out as your profile building, right? So that's the third pillar in your college application journey. And then there is a fourth pillar, which is college application, which includes shortlisting of universities, which includes writing essays, which includes collecting letter of recommendations. All of that is part of your college application process, right? So that's the fourth major pillar. So you need to have all of this in place if you're looking to get into colleges outside of India. And now that could be in UK, it could be Oxford, Cambridge, King's College, Imperial College, or it could be in US, be it UC Berkeley, MIT, Stanford, Purdue, UC Berkeley, UCLA, any college that you name, the process is very, very similar. Though for every geography that you look at, whether it's US or UK or Canada or Singapore, I think few things would be different, right? I think, and that would be the component. Each of these component weightage might be different in different place. For example, in US, academics is about 60% important. And then the rest 40% is your standardized test, profile building, your college application. However, if you look at UK, your academics is almost about 80% important, and then the rest all things comes into play, right? So I think the weightage would be different for all these four parameters, but all these four parameters put together will help you get into any top universities abroad, right? So these are the four major pillars. However, keeping in mind today's time constraint that we have, we are going to focus only on the standardized test score, and we will not look at the other pillars. And in that, I think the first thing that we really need to talk about is the test, right? So I think the first test that I'm going to discuss is SAT, right? Which is called Scholastic Aptitude Test. This is one of the exams which is conducted by an organization called College Board. It's a US-based organization. This exam happens 7 times a year. You could write it as many times as you want. 2 is an ideal number that is recommended. There are almost 44 universities in India which are accepting SAT scores today. And that's why even if you're not looking to go outside of India, you still should try and understand about this exam, right? Now, if you really look at this exam is going to be a 2 hours, 14-minute test. They largely have 2 sections. One is English and one is math. This exam is required by most US colleges. And it also helps in many other geographies. I think 2 important things to note here. Required for most US colleges. Now, why am I saying most? I would like to help you understand 3 important terms here, right? When you go to any college website, let's say you go to a Purdue University website, in their undergrad admission page, you will realize either they will say they are test mandatory. That means you have to have the exam, and Purdue and MIT are 2 examples of colleges which are test mandatory. Then there are some university which says we are test optional. What do they mean by this? They basically mean if in case you have if you have done the test, you should submit it. If you have not done it, you could skip it. That is what they generally say. However, this test option is only introduced during the pandemic, and the reason was very clear because there were a lot of countries, probably in Africa and other places, where students were not able to do the SAT exam, and hence they made it optional. However, countries like India and the candidates who are applying from India, they should ideally be doing it with the SAT score, because almost about 60 to 70% would be applying with the scores. It will become really difficult for the remaining 15, 20, 30% students to justify why they did not do it, right? So if you see that it is test optional, consider it that you will have to write it. You should write the exam and then submit it. The third category of colleges, test blind. Test blind are the colleges for which you don't need the SAT, right? So all colleges in California, all universities in California are test blind in nature, whether it's Berkeley, whether it's UCLA, San Diego, UC Irvine, any college that you look at in the California, they are test blind. For those universities, you don't need SAT score or ACT score, but they are very, very small in number, predominantly the California universities, right? I hope this helps you understand when you're looking at the admissions page. If you find these 3 terms, next time you would know what these 3 terms refers to, right? So that's important. The next part, I said, helps in many other geographies. So what do I mean by that, right? I think when I say many other geographies, because apart from US, you also have countries like UK, countries like Canada, Singapore, India, Australia. These are few places where it is not mandatory, but it's good to submit these scores if in case you have done this exam, right? You might have a better chance of admit, and you also have a better chance to probably get some scholarship if there is something to avail, right? I think that's the difference, or that's the term what I meant by helps in many other geographies, right? Now, let's try and understand more into this test, right? Though, as I said, SAT is digital now. It's going to be online. You have to get to a center and then write it. However, you can carry your own laptop and do the exam on your own device. The new SAT is going to be adaptive in nature. What do I mean by that? This is a very, very important term for you to understand. When I say SAT is adaptive, that means depending on your performance in first section, your second section difficulty level will get decided. For example, there are about 35 to 40 people right here in the webinar. If in case I am the one, let's say all of us will get the same section 1. However, depending on our performance, if I have not done well, my section 2 is going to be easy. If you have done well, then your section 2 is going to be difficult. So SAT is sectional adaptive, right? And I will help you understand how the scoring works in that case, right? We will take it up in the next slides probably. You can use your own device. As I said, you can carry your own laptop to the exam hall and do the exam. There's a clock on the screen which helps you with the time management. There is an easy movement between the question. You can move from one question to another and so on. You have access to maths formulas all in one place, right? Because it's a digital system, you can click on, with a click of a button, you will get access to all the maths formulas there. Apart from this, the exam is, as I said, is a shorter version. It's 2 hours, 14-minute test. Earlier, there used to be long passages and you had to answer the question from those passages. Now there are only one para, one question. So questions are a lot more concise. They are a lot more straightforward. You have more time per question and you have lesser number of questions. You're allowed to use calculator all throughout the math section. That's again a great welcome move. Scores are also available in days, rather weeks, which used to happen earlier, right? So I think that's another change which has happened. Now let's try and understand how does the scoring works, right? We understood that it is an adaptive exam, but now let's try and understand how does the scoring works if it is an adaptive exam, right? So as I said, if you really look at the SAT, let's look at it from this perspective, right? So there are two sections, English and maths. Now for English, you will have 2 modules. For maths, you'll have 2 modules. There's module 1 and module 2. Let's assume there are 20 questions in module 1 of English, right? Now, let's say any student write the exam and you got 16 out of 20 in module 1. Your module 2 paper is going to be difficult, A, plus your upper and lower limit of your final score for English will get decided. Your lower limit is 680 and your higher limit is 800, right? So that will get decided depending on your performance in stage 1 itself. For example, if I have done an exam and I get 8 out of 10, I'm falling in this bracket. My stage 2 paper is going to be easier. However, my lower and upper limit for stage 2 also gets pre-decided because of this. My lower limit is 440, my maximum limit is 560. Hence, the key takeaway from here is you have to try and make sure you do really, really well in your stage 1. If you don't do well in your stage 1, your final score, your upper threshold get fixed, and you wouldn't want that to happen. You wouldn't want it to be as high as possible, because if your upper limit is decided, even if you end up doing exceptionally well in stage 2, it doesn't really help because that's the maximum that you can get. So that's how the adaptive scoring works. As I said in the beginning, if in case you guys have any questions, please feel free to put it up in the chat section. Happy to take all these questions at the later half of the webinar. Let's try and do some number crunching here, right? So I think there are 2 major sections. As I said, you have the English, you have the maths. In case of English, there are a total of roughly about 54 questions and you have 64 minutes to solve these questions. The minimum score that you can get is 200. The maximum is 800. Similarly, in maths, you have a total of 44 questions and you have 70 minutes to solve these questions. So you have a minimum of 200 score and a maximum of 800 score. So overall, if you look at it, the minimum that you can score is 400. The maximum that you can score is 1600. So that's how the overall numbering works in terms of the exam. Now let's try and understand each of these sections individually, right? So as I said, in English, they're largely testing your reading and writing skills. When I say writing, I mean the grammar section skills, right? So it is a 2-stage adaptive design. You will have module 1 for English. You'll have module 2 for English. Depending on your performance in module 1, your module 2 gets decided. In each of these modules, you have a total of 27 questions and you have 32 minutes to solve these 27 questions. That means you have roughly about 1.19 minutes per question. And please do keep note of this time, because I'm going to do a comparative analysis when I will look at the ACT. So please do keep a note, 1.19 minutes per question is what you have for the ACT English section. Out of these 27 questions, I think this is also important to note, there are 25 operational questions and there are 2 experimental questions, right? So that means your performance in these 2 questions will not be accounted towards your final score. However, as a student, when you're attempting an exam, you wouldn't know which are these 2 questions, and hence you have to do all the 27 questions with the same level of focus, right? So for you, it's still a 27 question that you need to focus on. Now, what are they testing you on? As I said, there is going to be a small para. For each para, there is 1 question. I think so that is how the questions will be largely framed. They will largely test you on 4 content domains, which we will check in the next slide. All the questions which are pertaining to similar skills and a content domain will be grouped together, and they are always arranged from easy to most difficult level. The test, as I said, is largely divided into 2 modules, module 1 and module 2 for English. The passages or the paras which are taken up from different subject areas, which are literature, history, social studies, humanities, sciences, right? And I think this is the most important point. I see there are students who have joined today in the webinar who are coming from grade 9th and grade 10th. Folks, if in case you guys really want to do well in SAT, mark my advice, you have to really do well in reading. Reading is one of the areas where most of the students struggle, because we are not an avid reader. That's one. And second, even if we read, we don't really read the kind of reading that we really need to do, because we are probably reading fictional, right? That helps one part of it, but not the entire thing, because you're not able to understand or comprehend different complex other issues which are happening around, right? So my suggestion here is try and see if you can start reading Wall Street Journal or Washington Post article. I think that would really, really help you. Maybe 1 article a day, 2 articles a day, whatever you can. Start reading it. I think that would really help you to improve in the reading section. Plus, at the same point of time, if you try and understand, SAT is testing you on American English. However, we follow British English. So there are differences in terms of the rules as well. For example, if you're looking at British English, A, B and C, that's the right statement. However, if you're looking at American English, this is wrong. The correct statement would be A, B, comma and C, right? So there has to be a comma even before and, right? Which is not required in case of British English, but definitely required in case of American English. So when you're reading those articles, I think it will also help you to start observing these kind of small changes between the British English plus the American English grammar rules, right? So that will also help you to do well in the grammar section. Now, as I said, they largely test you on 4 content domains. Let's see what are those 4 domains. The first one is craft and structure, which largely helps you to understand whether how much you have understood the words and phrases in context. Are you able to evaluate the text rhetorically? Are you able to make connections between different related texts given, right? So that's craft and structure. Then you have information and ideas. How well can you understand the information provided to you and then present it in your own ideas, right? I think that is what is information idea. Now, if you really look at these 2 skills, these are the skills which are largely related to your reading comprehension skills. And hence it becomes super important for you to make sure that you're doing well in these particular areas. The next 2 is standard English convention, expression of ideas, which are largely based on your grammar skills, right? So your punctuation, sentence correction, sentence structure, usage, semicolon, dashes, all those rules are something that comes together for your standard English convention. And then expression of idea is nothing but skills which are related to your rhetorical skills, right? I think these are the 4 major content domain on which you are being tested in your SAT English section. With that, let's try and look at the math section. Now, just like SAT English, even math is a 2-stage adaptive test design. You will have a total of 22 questions and you have roughly about 35 minutes to solve 22 questions. That means you have roughly about 1.59 minutes per question. And I think please do keep note of this time, because this is super important. I will be doing an analysis or a comparative analysis between SAT versus ACT. So for SAT math, you have 1.59 minutes per question, right? And just like SAT English, Here as well, you have a 2 experimental questions. Out of 22 questions, there are 20 questions which are operational question, and there are 2 questions which are pre-test or experimental question. Now, what are they testing you on? They're largely testing you on algebra. So almost about 35% is algebra, which includes linear equation, inequalities, system of equation. The other 35% is problem solving and data analysis, which includes ratio, rate, proportion, unit rate, 1 and 2 variable data. The third one is advanced math, which is roughly about 15%. That includes anything which is non-linear, like quadratic equation, exponential equation gets covered under this. The fourth component is geometry and trigonometry, which is again another 15%, which includes your area, volume, line, angle, triangle, trigonometry, circle. All of that comes under part of geometry and trigonometry. I think, again, another thing that I want you guys to note here is, please see geometry and trigonometry here is only about 15%. And I think I would again use this point when I'm talking about the ACT as a comparative analysis here. If you, apart from this, everything else is largely related to algebra here, right? So it's very, very algebra heavy. So SAT math is very, very algebra heavy. I think that's the key takeaway from this particular slide that we can take. And also the other key takeaways, if you're a student who is in grade 10th, I believe you probably would have done these topics by now, right? So I think post grade 10, and towards the later half of grade 10, I think you're good to start preparing and start working on your SAT, right? Because by the time you've already covered all the concepts. So that's on the SAT side. Now let's try and jump onto the other test, which is ACT. It's called American College Testing. I will largely be doing a comparative analysis between the two, between the SAT versus ACT. And I think through that, we will try and understand the differences here, right? So ACT is another exam called American College Test, conducted by an organization called ACT.org, which is again a US-based organization. Please note, you don't have to write both the exam. You only have to write one exam, which is the right fit exam for you. I think that is super, super critical here at this point of time, right? And that is what I will try and help you understand, which is the right fit test for you, right? Let's try and look at the similarities, right? Both these exams are online exams, digital exams. Results will come out pretty soon. You have to go to a center and write these exams. Both these exams happen almost 7 times a year. So I think a lot of commonalities between the two exams. Now let's try and look at the differentiating factors. So duration. I think ACT is a 2-hour 55-minute test plus a 40-minute optional essay component. So it's a very, very lengthy test as compared to SAT, which is just a 2-hour 14-minute test. The other difference, look at the number of sections. There are 5 sections in the ACT as opposed to only 2 sections, which we have encountered in the SAT. So that's another difference. Apart from that, I think this also tests largely on the English and maths component. And that is what we're going to see on the next slides, right? So let's try and compare these two exams, right? Let's try and look at the sections. The first section that you will encounter is English, which is very similar to the grammar content, wherein, and it's scored on a scale of 1 to 36. The second section is math section, wherein you will have again scoring from 1 to 36. The third section would be reading. The fourth section is science. And I think this is an important point, science, and I'll come back to this later because I think that's where a lot of people have some sort of myth around the science section. And then you have the optional essay component. Please note ACT is scored on a scale of 1 to 36, right? Unlike SAT, which is scored on a scale of 400 to 1600, ACT is scored on a scale of 1 to 36, 36 being the best, 1 being the lowest. Then there is an optional essay component, which is scored on a scale of 2 to 12, 2 being the lowest and 12 being the highest. But essays are completely graded separately and they're not mixed with your overall scoring. So I think that becomes super important. Now let's try and understand each of these individual sections. So the first section, as I said, is ACT English, which is very similar to the grammar section. That's what they're testing you on. Look here. So you have about 45 minutes and you have 75 questions to solve in 45 minutes. That means you have roughly about 36 seconds per question. And if you remember, I said, keep a note on the time. In English, in SAT English, you had roughly about 1.19 minutes per question. So I think there's a crazy time difference between the SAT English versus the ACT English. You have to be really, really quick in the ACT exam. So I think another important point to note as a difference here is, for ACT, the level of questions are going to be simpler as opposed to what you will encounter in SAT. However, you have to be really, really quick in the ACT exam. Now, as a student, you need to decide, are you somebody who likes to get difficult question, but more time versus easy question, less time? I think that's a call that you have to take as an individual. However, what they're testing you on is very similar to what they test you on the SAT. It's still the same usage and mechanics and rhetorical skills, which is exactly the same what they were testing on the SAT grammar section as well. The next section that you will encounter in ACT is ACT Maths. There again, you have 60 minutes, you have 60 questions, you have 1 minute per question. That again means, if you remember in SAT, we said there is 1.59 minutes per question. So there is a lot of time constraint here, unlike SAT. Same thing, the questions are going to be a lot more straightforward as opposed to what you will encounter in the SAT. But here, you have less time to solve those questions, right? So again, you have to figure out what is the right fit for you. What are they testing you on? Largely algebra. So there is roughly about 30 to 35 questions out of 65 which are coming from algebra. Then the remaining are coming from geometry and trigonometry, which is roughly about 24 to 25 questions. So if you really look at it, almost about 40 to 45% of ACT math is non-algebra or geometry and trigonometry, which is, again, if you remember, I said we will go back and relook at this fact. SAT is algebra heavy. On the other hand, ACT is not. ACT will have equal weightage to the algebra versus the geometry and trigonometry. So that's could be another point that you would like to look at. Are you somebody who is not good at algebra? Then you may want to look at ACT. Or if you're somebody who's not good at geometry, trigonometry, you may want to look at SAT. So that again becomes another differentiating factors between the two exams, which might help you to decide which is the right fit test for you, right? So that's on the ACT math section. Then you have the ACT reading section, which is the third section. This section is very, very similar to what you will encounter in the SAT. In terms of the time, at least, you will have about 4 passages. Every passage will have about 10 questions that you will have to answer. There are roughly about 40 questions and you have 35 minutes to solve these questions. That means you roughly have about 52 seconds to solve the question, which is still okay as compared to SAT English, where you had about 1.19 minutes per question. What are they testing you on? Exactly the similar things. So you will encounter the passages which are about 750 to 800 words, and they'll be taken up from different zones, which is prose fiction, social science, humanities, and natural sciences, right? Again, reading becomes super important skill, very, very important for you to start reading if in case you're not reading, if you want to do well in your English section, whether it's SAT or ACT. What are they testing you on? Pretty much the same thing, your understanding of content, purpose, tone, attitude, point of view, all of it is being tested just like the SAT reading as well. The next section that you have is an ACT science section. And I think this is an important one, right? I think a lot of parents and students come to me and have this question saying, hey, Rashdeep, you know what? We don't want to, I mean, the child has not taken science in school. So maybe they should not do the ACT because ACT science would be difficult. Or we don't want to apply to STEM course. Maybe we shouldn't be doing ACT science, right? Now, just to clarify here, ACT science is nothing but a reading section. You are reading science-based passages and answering the question. There is no other difference in the ACT science section. So please do note that there are roughly about 40 questions and you have 35 minutes to solve these questions. You roughly have about 52 to 53 seconds per question, just like the ACT reading section. Having said that, if in case you are a science student, you will always have an advantage on the ACT science section because you would always have the context knowledge. However, even if you've not done it, don't worry, you would still be okay because you can always do it like an unseen passage. But what are they testing you on? They largely divide the question into 3 broader categories, or the passages into 3 broader categories. The first one is data representation, wherein there is some table, graph, charts are given. You need to read and understand it and answer the question. The second one is research summary, where there is some research which is being presented, and now there is an experiment, the research hypothesis, the research is presented. You have to read the entire context and then answer the question. So that is research summary. The third part is conflicting viewpoints, where let's say there are 2 people who have presented their viewpoint, which might be a conflicting viewpoint. Now you need to read both the conflicting viewpoint and then answer the question. So that's the third component, which is your conflicting viewpoint kind of passages, right? So these are 3 different categories of passages that you will encounter in your ACT science section. That's the major difference between the SAT versus ACT. And I think this is super important for you to understand at this point of time, that between the two exams, which is the right fit for you. Are you somebody who is okay with the speed but needs easier question? Or are you somebody who is not okay with the speed and you need more time, but you're okay with difficult question, right? Or are you somebody who is not okay with a lot of algebra, or are you somebody who is not okay with a lot of geometry, right? So I think there are various such factors that you need to account for when you're taking this call, whether you should be doing an SAT versus ACT. But I understand just purely based on this, I don't think it's easy. I think from our side, post this webinar, for all the students and families who have registered with us, we would be sending out the recording of this webinar. Plus, we will also be sending out a free diagnostic test link, which will have a free diagnostic test for digital SAT and ACT. Feel free to write the free diagnostic test and feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to sit with you one-on-one for a 30-minute free consultation session where we can walk you through your report and help you understand, take a decision between SAT versus ACT, right? So we would do this. You can expect the mail to be in your inbox by end of the day today, and you can go ahead and attempt the test as and when you want. This is an online test that you can do. Since now we have understood about SAT and ACT, let's try and understand the next exam, which is PSAT. Now, what is PSAT, right? So PSAT stands for Preliminary SAT or Practice SAT. I'm sure some of you would have heard about this term in the past as well. So I think the first thing first, no colleges will ask you to submit a PSAT score for admission. So you don't need the PSAT score for admission. Please note that. Now, since I've said that, now the next question would be, then why do we need PSAT, right? I think so there are different reasons that people write PSAT. PSAT happens in grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11. You could write it in any of the years. There are certain schools in every city which offer PSAT in the school premise itself. There are certain schools which don't. And in that case, you can always figure out a school that is offering the PSAT and you can go and write the exam in that particular center. So you always have that option as well. Now, why do people write PSAT, right? I think if you really try and understand, there are various reasons. One is obviously some people write it because they want to understand globally, where do they stand? Are they at 80th percentile, 70th percentile, 99th percentile? Where do they stand? And what are the areas they need to work and improve for the SAT, right? Because as I said, PSAT is nothing but like a practice SAT, right? The other important component to understand here is people write it because, so some of these students, if you remember, we talked about profile building, right? So some of these students also write PSAT because they want to apply to summer schools. So there are some certain summer schools program in US which ask you to submit your PSAT score if you've done it, right? So some of the students do write PSAT because they want to apply for summer school. The third category of people who write PSAT are also the people, let's say, if in case as a student you are an OCI card holder or you're an American citizen, and if you write PSAT in grade 11, it is also known as NMSQT, which is National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. So, but please note, this is only applicable if you're a US citizen and if you are in grade 11, right? So if both these criteria are met, then you can also write the PSAT in grade 11 and apply. You can get eligible for NMSQT. So these are the three major reasons why people write PSAT. In terms of the content, in terms of everything else, it's very, very similar to the SAT. It's like a subset of SAT is what I can consider. In terms of scoring, it's slightly different. It's instead of 1600, this is out of 1520. That's the maximum that you can score in the PSAT. That's the major difference between the two. So we've covered the SAT, we have covered the ACT, we have covered the PSAT. Now let's look at the last exam that we wanted to discuss. And I think I may not be able to go in detail into this because this in itself is a huge topic, but I'll try and give you a glimpse of this. It's called advanced placement courses. Let me try and help you understand what are APs, right? So APs are largely college level courses which are taken when you are in high school, and it also helps you to earn college credits, right? So what do I mean by that? You could actually write advanced placement courses when you're in grade 9, grade 10, grade 11th, or grade 12th. But why should you write it, right? So I think advanced placement courses are largely written by students for various reasons. And one of the reason is, so let me try and help you understand this. So in India, we have IGCSE, we have IB, we have PU board, we have CBSE, we have ICSE. There are multiple boards, right? So similarly in US, if you really look at it, they don't have any standardized board, right? So in US, advanced placement is considered like a board, which is where every school follows their own curriculum. Plus, in addition, they also ask the students to write the advanced placement courses. So that is how it works. So it is obviously widely recognized by US because students in US are writing this exam. But why should we do it? It helps you to stand out in your college admission process, because if you've done AP course, because they are of slightly higher difficulty order, it showcases to the college that you have done more than what your peers have done. So it helps you to stand out in your college admission journey. Second, it also helps you to earn college credits, right? So that means if you are in India, and let's say if I have done a particular course called AP Calculus and I get a 5 on 5, AP is scored on a scale of 1 to 5. If I get a 5 on 5, I actually earn 8 college credits, right? And remember, in US, when you have to graduate, let's say you need 120 credits. If you already have 8 credits in your kitty, now you only need 112 more credits to graduate, right? So that means A, you have earned these credits, and B, you have saved a lot of costs because now you don't have to do these credits when you are in US. Because in US, you are paying for every credit that you are earning. So I think that becomes super important. Third, you can skip the introductory classes. Now, why is this important? If you really try and understand, if I've done AP Calculus course, let me take the same example, and I got a 5 on 5, I can actually skip semester 1, semester 2, and semester 3 math courses. So I can actually skip the 3 math courses in college and straight away move to the 4th semester math course. I think these are the advantages which AP courses will provide. However, please note, unlike SAT, AP happens only once a year, which is in the month of May. And hence it becomes super important to make sure that you plan your prep really, really well. Otherwise, it will become super difficult to handle it. As I said, it happens only once a year. And it's also important to figure out which APs will you write. There are almost about 20 plus subjects for which APs are being offered in India, right? So you need to figure out which is the right AP for you. And that will be based on the major that you want to do, based on the college that you want to pursue, you are in which grade. So all these factors are considered when we're deciding which is the right AP for you, right? So I think this is about the APs. As I said, this is a much detailed topic. Hopefully in future, we might come back and talk to you about the advanced placement as well. You can always visit our YouTube and you'll find a webinar on advanced placement. You can also go through it if in case you want more details about it. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to set up a one-on-one consultation and help you understand this. Now with that, let me come back to the important part which we discussed right in the beginning, which is timelines, right? How does the timeline look like? And this is all linked back to my first slide where we started. There are 4 major pillars: academics, grade 9, 10th, 11th, 12th school grades. That's super, super important. The second pillar is my profile development. That means everything that you're doing to showcase to the college that you're good at a particular thing, that stands in your profile building. And that's exactly what you're doing for across 4 years. The third part is your college application. So you're applying to the college in your grade 12th. So you're writing the essays, you are collecting a letter of recommendation, right? All of that is happening in grade 12th. Apart from this, you have to look at the testing timelines. You can do the PSAT in grade 9th, grade 10th. PSAT can also be written in grade 11th as we discussed, but only if you're a US citizen, then it is known as an MSQT. With regards to the SAT, ACT, 10th is a good grade for you to start. If you're already in grade 11, you should start as soon as possible. Feel free to reach out to us, set up a free diagnostic test and have a discussion. If you're in grade 12 by any chance, you should start today, like as soon as possible, right? If you have not done the SAT already, because your application process will start in about August, September timeframe. So it's important for you to make sure that you have done your SAT, ACT before you start applying, right? Now, with regards to the APs, as I said, can be done in grade 9th, grade 10th, grade 11th. You could also write it in grade 12th. However, remember, when you're writing your APs in grade 12th, you're not writing it for your college admissions. You're largely writing it only for credit purposes, because after grade 12th, you probably would have received your admissions already, right? So at that point of time, it will not be going into your application. It's purely for your college credit purposes, right? So I think that these are the timelines, but I understand this is standard timelines, guys. If in case any one of you would like to understand, it's a very, very personalized one-on-one process. So if you would like to have a one-on-one discussion, feel free to reach out to us. I would request my colleague to put up our numbers on the chat section. Feel free to call us, get in touch with us. We will try and help you understand and help you sit with you and figure out what is the right timelines for you. Now, as I said in the beginning, we are not looking at just US. I think there are universities in India now which are accepting SAT scores. There are almost about 44 universities as of today which are accepting SAT scores in India. Some of them are Ashoka, Azim Premji, Shivnadar, Priya, Plaksha, Manavrachna. So these are some of the top universities which are accepting SAT scores in India as well. And here's the link. You can always go to international.college board website where you'll be able to find what are the colleges which are accepting SAT in India. So I think that's an important place for you to go and check out as well if you're looking for universities in India. And you will always have a question that here, Ashdeep, you know what, why can't I just go and write exams? I want to apply to these top 4 universities. Why can't I just go and write their exam? My answer is yes, you can, right? But the problem here is either you can write their exam, which is 4 different exams, or you just write SAT, which is 1 exam, and submit it to all the 4 universities, right? So I think this might be a better bet rather than trying to do 4 different exams. That's my counter to that question. Now, with that, we have covered this component. I would like to quickly walk you through the different phases in terms of how ReWiser as a company helps students prepare for SATs and ACTs, or APs for that matter. We largely divide our programs into 4 phases. We call it phase 0, 1, 2, and 3. Phase 0 is about doing a diagnostic test where we conduct the SATs and ACTs diagnostic, for which we are sending you the link by end of the day today. Feel free to write these exams. We will do a one-on-one 30-minute consultation session. We'll explain you your report, help you understand where you are, what you need to change, what you need to improve, and so on. And then we start the program. In phase 1, there are roughly about 35 to 40 hours of live online classes that happens. Every session is a 2-hour long class, and post every 2-hour long session, there are 2 hours of assignment that you need to do. So roughly about 80 hours of time commitment is what you need to do in the phase 1 process. All the assignments you're doing on our platform itself, which get assessed on its own, and you get the detailed answer explanation as well. Once this gets over, we move to phase 2, and from here on, it becomes a very, very highly customized, personalized plan. We assign a dedicated mentor to every student. This mentor will look at individual student score performance, figure out the areas where you have done well and the areas where you have not, and based on that, chalk out a study plan for you. And they will have a weekly check-ins with you to figure out what needs to be changed, what needs to be done to improve in certain areas, right? So that is what happens in phase 2. This is the point where you are doing a lot of sectional test practices. Once this gets over, you move to phase 3. Phase 3 is largely about full length test, where you're doing at least about 10 to 15 full length mock tests. Let's say after every 2 tests, if you're doing 1 test on Saturday, 1 on Sunday, you will obviously get a detailed report from our side saying what are the areas you've done well, what areas you need to improve. Additionally speaking, we will also have the mentors weekly check-in, where mentors will look at your score report and suggest you what you need to do to improve your scores. And additionally, you can sit with the faculties on a one-on-one basis to discuss your doubts. So this is how the overall program works. As we speak, we have spoken with the school as well, and we are trying to figure out if we are able to get a certain number of students from the primary school. We would like to create one single batch specifically for the primary students itself, so that we are able to adhere to your school exam timelines, because every school has timelines at exams at different point of time. We are looking to create a specific batch for the primary students. Post this webinar, we might be sending out an invite after checking with the school itself, after taking their permission, asking them if in case you are interested in the program. If in case we have enough interest, then we might go back and talk to the school about this as well. So I would urge you to please fill up that form and show your consent if in case you are interested in exploring this program. You can anyways give us a call and directly talk to us as well on a one-on-one basis. So this is the overall program, but as I said, we still believe that there is no one size fit for all. We give different options. You can do the full training with us, as I explained. You could just do the mock test, which is like a 10 test series, or you could also do a self-paced course. So you have different options available with us that you could opt for, whether it's SAT, whether it's ACT, or it's AP exam, right? So that's all that I wanted to cover. Okay, sorry, some of the numbers in our journey that I wanted to present. So I think the highest SAT score that we have achieved is 1590 out of 1600. The average SAT is around 1450. The highest ACT is around 36 out of 36. The average ACT is 32. The highest AP credit is 515. Average is about 4.6. And we currently offer about 13 subjects prep for the APs as well. So these are some numbers, how we have performed in the last 7 years. With that, I will open the forum now for Q&As. Happy to take all the questions that you guys have. I see there are a lot of questions that have coming in. I would request you guys to please put in your question. This is the time where I can answer. What happens if you do? Okay, I have a question. Okay, so initially there were some questions about we can hear, we cannot hear. Okay, I can see a question from AV. What happens if you do good in the first section but bad in the second? Which is fine because your lower and upper limit is decided, Miss AV, right? So let's say if your lower limit is 650 and upper is 680, the lowest that you can get is 650. You will not go lesser than 650. And the highest is 800. So if you're done really badly, it will be 650. Otherwise, it will be anywhere between 650 to 800. So that is how it happens in terms of the scoring. How long would it take to complete all the 3 phases? It generally takes about 5 to 6 months is what we see, AV. That's a general timelines. So let's say if you start prep now, ideally you're looking to write your first attempt in November, right? As I said, SAT happens 7 times a year. The next one is August, October, November, December, March, and May. So these are the and June. These are the 7 timelines when the SAT happens. Another question from Smita: in academics pillar, do schools see only English and math marks or overall academic performance? No, Smita, they will look everything put together. English and math is only and only for the standardized test, right? For SATs and ACTs. For the admissions, they are going to look at each and every subject that you have taken in grade 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th. What SAT scores are needed to get you scholarships in abroad universities, Kevin? Kevin, the more you have, the better it is, because it's not easy to get scholarship in the undergrad domain, and SAT is not the only criteria. There are other criteria which are important for you to get scholarship. So no score guarantees you a scholarship, Kevin. Another question from Shreyas: if I want to go to Germany, would SAT help me? No, Shreyas, you don't need SAT for Germany, but please be very, very careful, because when you're talking about Germany, in Germany, you don't have fees and all of that. I think that's great, but I think you need to have the language. So you need to learn German. I think that is super important. So make sure if in case you're very, very clear about Germany, try and start learning German as a language, because a lot of courses are being offered in German. And I think it is an important skill to have if you are looking to go to Germany for your undergrad. Another question from AV: if I want to go to Canada, should I take SAT or ACT? Great question, AV. I think if in case, and I think I missed this part, if in case you are looking to apply anywhere outside of US, also, I would say go for SAT, because SAT has more acceptance outside of US. If you're looking just US, then in that case, SAT, ACT wouldn't make much of a difference. But if you're also looking at outside of US, then I would say look for SAT. The question from Arushi: is SAT useful for only certain US universities or all of them? Arushi, not sure if you have joined late. We discussed about the 3 terms: mandatory, test optional, and test blind. Excluding the test blind universities, all universities will require you to submit your SAT scores, excluding the test blind, right? So I think that is very, very important. When should we start preparing for the SATs, Raghavarshini? Raghavarshini, the ideal time is after you're done with your 10th. The summer break of 10th is the best time to start. Or if you're coming from international curriculum, you can also think of doing it when you are in grade 10. So these are the 2 ideal time. That's the ideal time when you can start. So if you're done with your grade 10, that's the ideal time to start. Or if you're in grade 10, you can write the diagnostic depending on where you are and what are your preparedness level. Based on that, we can see and suggest whether you should start now or later. That's the timeline. Another question from Sunil: do you provide assistance for PSAT? Sunil, yes, we do provide assistance for PSAT, but honestly speaking, I generally don't prefer that. I recommend students to do the PSAT on your own, rather take the prep for the SAT itself, because PSAT and SAT has the same content. There is no difference in terms of the content. It's only the, let's say, the level of questions which are different, right? So if you look at PSAT is like a subset of SAT. So it'll have easier set of questions. That's it. Okay, another question from Ishan: do we need coaching for SAT or can we prepare it by ourselves as well? Ishan, you can definitely prepare on your own, right? I mean, it's like any other exam, right? IIT, NEET, SAT, CUT, CLAT, just like any other exam, you can always do it on your own or you can take help. It's all about, how do you want to utilize your time best? That's the only thing. Otherwise, you can definitely do it on your own. Another question from AV. I just finished 10th and started 11th. So when should I start preparing for SAT? This is the perfect time, AV. You should try and see if you can start as soon as possible. As I said, the moment you're done with your 10th, the summer break that you get is the idea for you to start preparing. So for you, this is the right time. So please think about starting it as soon as possible. Feel free to reach out to us. I think we have dropped our numbers here. The first number here on the screen is my number. Feel free to reach out on that number and we'll be happy to help and discuss. Any other questions from anyone? While everyone is thinking about the questions, I hope the session was useful. I hope you guys have gotten enough information about SATs, ACTs, and AP exam. Feel free to drop in your feedback as well in the chat section. Happy to hear if if there is anything else that you wanted to hear from us. Another question from AV, when should we start preparing for AP classes? AV, it all depends on you're in which grade. So as I said, AP happens once a year. So we have students in grade 9th writing AP, grade 10th writing AP, grade 11th writing AP. So generally we start our prep in around September, October timeframe, and it goes until May. May is when the actual exam happens. So September, October is when we will start our AP prep. And any other question? Can I write SAT in 11th and do APs in 12th? You can do AP in 12th AV. The problem here is by the time you would have received your admission. So you cannot use your APs to stand out in college application. You are using your APs purely for college credit purposes. That's the major difference, but you can definitely write it in grade 12th. How many times can we do APs? Actually, AP happens only once a year, and you can write the improvement exam. You can write multiple times for the same subject. However, it is generally not recommended. So try and see if you can do one attempt and do it best, and try and close on it. Similar question on the SAT would be how many times you can write the SAT. Ideal is 2 times because there are certain colleges which allow you to do super scoring, right? What do I mean by super scoring? You can actually take English from one section and maths from the other test. That's what super scoring is. Hence, 2 is an ideal number, but if you want to write 3 times as well, that's okay, but nothing more than that. I mean, we generally recommend twice, not more than that. But at max, if you want to still write it, 3 is maximum that you should do it. Another question from Arushi, can we take STST more than once? Yes, I think I have answered that question, Arushi. Shreyash, can ACT be given after 12th? You can write ACT after 12th, Shreyash, but I'm assuming in that case, you are taking a gap year, right? Because the college application process works very, very differently in US. You apply almost a year in advance, right? For example, for 2024 admission, the admission process will start in August, September, July, August timeframe, right? So if you're doing it after 12, that means you're planning to take a gap year. If we look for, okay, another question from EV. If we are looking for universities abroad, what sort of grades do they look for? See, EV, good question, but you have colleges for everyone, right? I mean, I think the way you really need to look at this is differently. Let me try and do whatever best I can in terms of the scores, whether it's SAT, whether it's school grades, and then see based on these scores, where can I apply? Right? I think that is the way that you really need to look at it, because whether you get a 1200, whether you get a 1400, 1500, 1550, there is college for everybody abroad, right? So I think it will just depend on the ranking of the college that you will end up applying depending on your performance. Any other questions? What are expenses studying there? Any figure? Atul, it kind of varies, but I would say about, I think about 1.5 CR is definitely an expense for the next 4 years, if in case you're looking to do undergrad in US, and everything else would be, let's say 20-25% lesser than that. No, that's for the 4 year, I said. And not even one, actually 1.5 to 2, ideally. You know, for roughly about 35 to 50 lakh per year is what you really need. Perfect. Any other questions that we have here? I think I've taken all the questions. Shiz, I'm not very sure about the fee structure in Germany. You'll have to look at it. Perfect. Great. I think those are the questions that we have. Okay, I got one more. Which exam do students generally score better on SCT or ST? It completely varies, AV, right? And hence, you know, this entire webinar where I was trying to help you understand which is an ideal test for you. You need to figure out what is the right test for you and then do it accordingly. Another question from Atul. Sorry, again to ask, approximately 40 lakh would include stay and study. It varies from location to location, Atul. It could be a good range, but yes, around that is the figure, right? It could be anywhere between, as I said, 40 to 50, 60 lakh, including everything put together per year, including stay and study. Thanks, Avi. Great. I hope I was able to answer most of your questions and queries. I hope the webinar was useful. I would like to thank each one of you for joining in on Saturday evening. Thanks again. Thanks to the counseling team, the school, for giving us this opportunity to talk to you guys. We would send out the mailer to each one of you with the diagnostic test link with the webinar recording. Feel free to reach out to us and have a one-on-one conversation at the end. Thank you. Thanks a lot.